The Landing Craft Infantry were several classes of seagoing amphibious assault ships of the Second World War used to land large numbers of infantry directly onto beaches. They were developed in response to a British request for a vessel capable of carrying and landing substantially more troops than the smaller Landing Craft Assault. The result was a small steel ship that could land 200 troops, traveling from rear bases on its own bottom at a speed of up to 15 knots. Some 923 were built starting in 1943, serving in both the Pacific and European theaters, including a number that were converted into heavily armed beach assault support ships, commonly called Lci items. The Lci supplemented the small Lcas, LCVPs as a way to get many troops ashore before a dock could be captured or built. As such, they were the largest dedicated beachable infantry. Landing craft was a transporter for troops and small craft such as the British Lci and the Allied infantry. Development. The Lci was designed to carry 200 troops to up to 15 knots and be as capable at landing as the Lca. Since a steel hull would be needed and steel was already earmarked for building destroyers at home, the U.S. was approached. The plans were developed into the Lci Landing Craft Infantry. The original British design was envisioned as being a one-time use vessel which would simply ferry the troops across the English Channel, and were considered an expendable vessel. As such, no troop sleeping accommodations were placed in the original design. The troops were provided benches upon which to sit while they were transported across the channel. This was changed shortly after initial use of these ships, when it was discovered that many missions would require overnight accommodations. The US was able to come up with an easily built and mass-produced design by using non-traditional shipbuilding facilities and equipment. The US established Lci building yards at 10 different locations. Construction. There were 3 major types of Lci which differed mostly by the location of the ramps and by the shape of the conning tower. All of these ships had similar hulls. The hull of all Lci were 158 feet long with a 23-foot beam, making them relatively long and narrow. The 3 major Lci types are normally referred to as A. Square conning tower, side ramp; B. Round con, side ramp; C. Round con, bow ramp. On Lci 1-349 class, the deck was wider than the prow and 2 gangways on either side of the bow led onto a pair of ramps that were lowered, and down which troops would disembark. The Lci 350 class had a single enclosed bow ramp with 2 bow doors that swung open. The reason for moving the ramp to the inside was to provide some protection for the troops as they disembarked to the beach, if only by concealing them from enemy sight. Also, the low, squared-off conning tower was upgraded on later models 350 and higher, with a taller, round conning tower which afforded slightly more visibility from the bridge. The steepness and narrowness of either type of bow ramps made the Lci impractical for landing troops as part of an initial assault against a defended beach, and they were sometimes reserved for the follow-up waves after the Lca or LCPL boats had landed. However, they were included in the first waves at numerous invasions such as Anzio, Normandy, southern France, Elba, Saipan, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, Guam, and Okinawa. Propulsion. All Lci were twin-shaft propelled by 2 banks of Detroit diesel 6-71 quad diesel engines that produced a total of 1,600 bhp. These engines were a wartime expedient design that utilized existing and readily available engines. 4 two-stroke Detroit diesel 6-71 with Roots blower were coupled to create a bank for each of the 2 propeller shafts. The 4 engines per bank were joined together using individual drive clutches, hence the name quad diesel. If a single engine were to fail, The broken engine could be disconnected from the unit via its clutch and repaired while the other three engines were still operating. General Motors Corporation Electromotive Division supplied the reduction gears, propellers, drive shafts and control units. Each of the two propellers was a reversible pitch propeller, which allowed the propeller shaft to spin only in one direction for either a head or a stern operation. This, coupled with the use of a stern anchor which was dropped as the ship approached the beach, was used to pull the ship off the beach after the troops had disembarked. Two auxiliary Detroit diesel 271s drive the 230 kW 120 volts DC ship's service generators. Armament Lci were armed originally with 4 to 5 20mm Lci automatic cannons. Each gun was mounted inside of a round gun tub with an integral splinter shield. As the war progressed, several Lci were modified into Lci gunboats. These gunboats, called Lci, had 3 of the forward-mounted 20mm Lci cannons removed and replaced with heavier single-barrel 40mm Bofors cannons. Also, several Lci had various types of rocket launcher racks added in place of the side ramps and inside the well decks. These ships were sometimes designated as Lci for rocket ships. Still other Lci were modified to carry 3 4.2-inch heavy mortars. These were designated as Lci. Service history. The first Lcis entered service in 1943 chiefly with the Royal Navy and United States Navy. Early models were capable of carrying 180 troops. This was increased to 210 later. Craft in service with the two navies had some variation according to national preferences. Some 923 Lci were built in 10 American shipyards and 211 provided under Lend-Lease to the Royal Navy. In Royal Navy service they were known as HM-Lci. During Project Hula, the United States in June and July 1945 secretly transferred 30 Lcis to the Soviet Navy, which designated the type as Desanti Usuda or DS. They saw action against the Japanese after the Soviet Union entered the war against Japan in August 1945, and 5 DS-1-672, DS-5-525, DS-9-554, DS-43-943, and DS-47-671 out of 16 involved were lost on 18 August 1945 during the landings on Shumshu. The Soviet Union eventually returned 15 of the surviving Lcis to the United States, all in 1955. In use, the Lci fleet was used for numerous missions. One important use was for smoke laying to obscure the invading fleet from enemy artillery or aircraft. Still others were used to provide close-in gunfire support to the troops who had just landed on the beach. In one such episode, 8 Lci were used 2 days prior to the invasion of Iwo Jima to protect underwater demolition team insertion and beach mapping teams. They were mistaken by the Japanese defenders as the main invasion, and were fired upon by numerous previously hidden large-caliber coastal defense artillery. 3 of these Lci were sunk and all were damaged. Lt. Rufus G. Herring received the Medal of Honor for this action. In another instance, Lt. Alec Guinness RNVR made numerous trips as the commanding officer of HMS Lci 124 delivering troops to the beach near Cape Passero Lighthouse on 9 July 1943 during the Allied invasion of Sicily. He missed the call from his commander to delay the landing and went on to land 25 minutes ahead of the rest of the Lci flotilla. As he was returning from the beach empty, he was rebuked by his flotilla commander, who thought he was deserting from the fight. When he informed the commander he was on his way back to get more troops after having already landed once. Most Lcis were struck from service by both the Royal Navy and the U.S. Navy in 1946, and were put into reserve, sold, scrapped, or used as target ships. In addition to the 30 Lcis transferred to the Soviet Union in Project Hula, the United States also transferred Lcis to Argentina, the Republic of China, France, Indonesia, Chile, the Dominican Republic, the Philippines, Israel, Thailand, and the Republic of Korea. In February 1949, the U.S. reclassified the remaining Lcis as landing ship infantry. Landing ship infantry was a term that had been used during the war since around 1941 by the British for various vessels such as converted ferries and passenger ships that could carry 800–1,800 troops close to shore, the final transfer being by smaller boats. Variants. As with the landing craft tank, the Lci was used as the basis of a number of conversions into specialist vessels. Lci Flotilla flagship, equipped to carry flag officers and crew. Lci gunboat 2 or sometimes 3 40mm guns, 6 50 caliber machine guns and 10 Mk. 7 rocket launchers were added to the existing armament to provide close-in fire support for landings. This variant was used for the basis of the LCS class of landing craft support ships. The same hull was used and more armament was added, but the troop-carrying capability was removed. Lci Mortar, equipped with 3 M2 4.2-inch mortar for naval use. Lci Rocket, a platform for 6 5-inch rocket launch. This platform was rather unsophisticated as the rocket launches were fixed to the deck, and so the ship had to be maneuvered to aim them. When fired, the crew had to take shelter below decks to escape the blast of the rocket engines. Fairmile Type H landing craft, Lci. At the same time as the Lci was handed over for U.S. development and production, the British reworked the need for a raiding vessel into something that could be produced natively without making demands on limited resources. Fairmile Marine had already designed a number of small military vessels that were built in wood, and they produced the Fairmile Type H, which was another prefabricated wooden design. This was taken on as the Landing Craft Infantry, or LCI. One Fairmile H still survives, a veteran of D-Day and the costly assault on Waltrin. It is a houseboat on the River Arder, Shoreham by Sea, West Sussex, England. LCS. The Landing Craft Support Mark I inshore LCS Mark Chapter 2 was based on the LCI hull, and were built by the United Kingdom, intended for use as a support vessel providing additional firepower. The Mk-1 carried a tank turret complete with its QF 2-pounder gun, but for the Mk-2 this was replaced with a turret mounting the QF 6-pounder gun. To this was added two Lycon 20mm cannon and two 0.5-inch Vickers machine guns. 10 were built in all. LCS Mk-3 LSSL. The Landing Craft Support, or LCS Mark Chapter 3, was built by the United States. These ships were built on a standard LCI hull, but were modified to add gunfire support equipment and accommodation. They were armed with a single 350 caliber gun and/or two twin 40mm cannon and numerous 20mm cannon. These ships were prevalent in most major Pacific theater invasions beginning in late 1944. The type was reclassified as Landing Ship Support, large in 1949. 130 of this type were built. Surviving LCIs. There are several LCIs that still survive and are available to be seen by the public. The Lci 713 is located in Portland, Oregon near the I-5 bridge over the Columbia River. It is currently owned and being restored by a non-profit 501c3 group, the Amphibious Forces Memorial Museum. Built in 1944 in Neponset, Massachusetts, the ship was transferred to the Pacific Theater, where it saw action in making 2 assault landings. Zamboanga, Philippines in March 1945 and Brunei Bay, Borneo in June 1945. Purchased as war surplus initially for use as a log-hauling tugboat, the engines were removed and it was relegated to a floating storage hulk in Stevenson until the late 1950s, when it was abandoned and sank into the river mud on the shore of the Columbia River. In the late 1970s the ship was refloated and restoration began on the ship. Lci 713 has changed ownership until finally sold to the AFMM in 2003. The Lci 713 has been continually restored with the goal of becoming a historically correct operating museum vessel. Another survivor is Lci 1091, moored in Eureka, California. She is owned and operated by the Humboldt Bay Air and Sea Museum. The ship was used in the Korean War in 1951 to 1953 as an infectious disease control ship. Her interior was modified to accommodate a larger crew that included 10 medical doctors and lab technicians. In the late 1950s, the ship was sold as surplus for use as an Alaskan fishing vessel. 30 years later, the 1091 was purchased and brought to Eureka, California in the 1990s by Ralph Doc Davis for use as a private fishing vessel. Doc Davis sold the ship to the museum, headed by Mr. Leroy Marsh, and they're working together to restore the Lci 1091 to an operating museum vessel. Several former Lci hulls were obtained and modified for use as sightseeing vessels after World War II by the New York City Circle Line. The Circle Line 7, Circle Line 8 are all now retired. Circle Line X is currently on active duty with Circle Line 42nd Street on New York City's Pier 83. Several other Lci hulls have been located around the world. The Argentine Navy has at least 3, which were being used as of 1998. The ex-Lci 653, renamed Husky II, was used as a pilot boat and then a fisheries tender in Alaska before being broken up at Homer, Alaska in 2010. 3 derelict Lci hulls remain at Staten Island, New York, in the Witt Marine Salvage Yard. Only one LCS Mk-3, the former LCS 102, still survives in original configuration. She is moored at Mare Island, California, where she is being restored to her World War II appearance by volunteers.